the real issue is with jobs right now. What do you anticipate?
Well, I think it is important, even though it continues to be backward looking as the situation with the virus has continued to deteriorate. But, we've got an expectation for a job gain, 400,000 overall. You do have a big drag from a roll-off of census workers. So government employment is going to hold down the overall number. So the private number is what I think people will focus on. And we've got a 600,000 increase there, which would be another step down. So we continue to see some loss of momentum. And of course, as you look ahead to what the November and December results might show, with evidence that we're losing some momentum, of course, as the virus numbers tick up, I think that's clearly going to be a worry, as we move forward in terms of how overall the fourth quarter, not just employment, but overall GDP numbers and overall levels of activity are going to look.
Yeah, that's a good point. Professor Spriggs, I know you're going to be looking at the government numbers in particular. A lot of people are trying to figure out how local and state governments are dealing with the funds that they may not be getting at this point for COVID. But Michelle brings up a good point. I forgot about the census workers kind of rolling off. How do you kind of sift through the mud in those two factors?
Well, the census will show up with the federal government. The state and local government numbers have been weak. We've lost more state and local jobs already than we did during the Great Recession. A lot of state and local governments are cutting pay or giving workers furlough days. That's going to be a big stressor. We saw the personal income drop during the third quarter, and so going into the fourth quarter, that drop in pay in the public sector is going to be another drag.
What other numbers do you watch to kind of track this? Because as Michelle points out, these are backward-looking numbers. What's the best way you have of kind of telling what's happening in real time on the ground?
Yeah, so a lot of the state and local county national associations have been monitoring their response. So it gives updates on what some counties are doing to try and balance their budgets in this really tough time. And so I look at that to see what are their mechanisms for coping.
Hey, Michelle, we spoke with Walter Isaacson earlier, and he laid out the case that I've heard from a lot of other people, too, that once we kind of get through the immediate of the election, there likely is going to be a quick stimulus package that comes because of how the vote came down, the idea that there were seats lost by the Democrats in the House. Do you think that's the case?
Well, so much when we think about the prospects for additional fiscal stimulus, I actually think comes down to the Senate, because ultimately all roads have to go through Mitch McConnell. And while we've had a lot of conversations about the work that Pelosi has done, of course, with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, in the end, it's got to get through the Senate. And that seems to be where there's been the most amount of hesitancy to bring forward another big stimulus plan. And as everybody is watching, the Senate is likely to remain in Senate Republican control, though we may not know that until January. I'm not sure how that then plays out in terms of the desire for Mitch McConnell to actually bring forward a big stimulus plan to potentially, as a welcoming gift, if you will, for a new President Biden. So I guess I'm a little bit skeptical still, as I've been all along, about the odds of another big stimulus plan coming sooner rather than later. And I think the markets are looking at the prospect for a continued divided government to actually signal we are not likely to get big fiscal stimulus plans as we may have seen under a blue sweep sort of scenario.
Sure. Professor Spriggs, one of the things we've been trying to figure out is, when the real crunch time hits. We know that there are a lot of Americans that are really suffering, whether they're small business owners, whether they're people who have been unemployed, people who have been hit hard by COVID. We know the cases are climbing. But the market has shrugged off a lot of that to this point because the economic numbers that have been coming in haven't been as bad as you might have anticipated or as bad as they could have been. The market holding up takes off the pressure on the politicians. we know some of these additional measures are going to expire soon, but when do you kind of think there's a breaking point that says, okay, this is as long as we can go without a stimulus package?
I think we've kind of passed it. The stress on the household sector is huge now, and the pressure on the commercial side is getting bigger because a lot of states gave moratoriums on evictions. People are getting behind on debt. There are going to be a lot of landlords who are being stressed by this. And so far, people have been able to manage on the tailwind of the CARES initiative, where they got a stimulus check and where they were also able to get extra money from unemployment insurance. When we get to the end of December, a lot of people will lose their PUA, unemployment insurance. It will expire. We have people who now need extended unemployment insurance because it's been over 6 months since they started losing their jobs back in March. January is going to be a real crunch time because a larger spectrum of the economy is going to feel the households not having the money.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.